Welcome back to Generative AI and the delivery of legal services. Today we're going to be talking about the impact of AI on the business and the practice of law. First, what is the impact on the daily legal practice? Shifting roles and responsibilities, evolving business models, and finally, we'll talk about some practical real-world examples and best practices. So what is the impact of AI on the daily practice of law? Well, first of all, the adoption of AI has been incredible over the past year. In 2023, it was 19%. That jumped 60% to 79% in 2024. So the adoption of AI by law firms has jumped dramatically in 1 year. And now that we're in 2025, I'm sure that number has increased even further. Now, this was according to a report put together by Clio, their legal trends report from 2024, and Wolters Kluwer also found a similar result in its report. Now, the figure for Wolters Kluwer of 86% of in-house counsel and 76% of law firms was at a frequency of using AI once a week. The Clio report actually had a spectrum of usage. So the 79% represents those who use it daily to those who use it weekly or monthly. So it's not everyone using it voraciously, but there is a 79% uptake of AI usage generally at law firms. So it's still very impressive, especially when put together with the Wolters Kluwer figures. So what is AI being used for? How is it making things more efficient? Well, it's being used on a number of routine tasks. For example, most prominently legal research with tools like Harvey and CoCounsel. Also for contract drafting, as we saw with Spellbook and other applications that use AI to review documents and contracts. Strategic thinking, using AI as a second mind. It is invaluable, and I know that I've stressed this in class, that it's not only to do the thing for you, but also to help you think clearly to get to your final destination in terms of strategy, argument, or negotiation. Finally, faster turnarounds. Because of AI's ability to review thousands of documents quickly and to draft documents very quickly, as we've seen with our guest, Troy Doucette, it leads to faster turnaround times, which means that you could take on more clients and you can do more work if you want, or you can make the same amount of money in less time. So AI has become a force multiplier, and smaller firms, solo and small firms, have found that using AI tools can help them to compete with much larger law firms. And for larger law firms, it's actually become something that helps them to multiply their effect. In this study by Thomson Reuters, it found that using AI saved at least 4 hours per week, which amounted to over a year of $100,000 in billable hours. And Clio's report found that 75% of billable tasks are automatable. So obviously that begs the question about the billable hour model and if that's going to stay in place. Shifting roles and responsibilities caused by AI adoption. Now, it is true that junior tasks, as we've known them, will decline, in that entry-level work of that initial memo drafting, legal research, and review will become less common, and junior lawyers, I believe, will be able to add value by being involved in strategy, client relationships, and so the kinds of tasks that an attorney might take on as a mid-level or senior associate in terms of client development, business development, and strategy are, I think, tasks and skills that junior lawyers will take on more quickly. Because Earlier strategic involvement will come about because the learning curve will be accelerated. It'll be possible to learn much more in a much shorter amount of time because of AI and automation. And so that junior associates will be able to advance more quickly in the quality of the work that they're given. Senior lawyers will not only have supervision of junior associates, but also AI. And they'll have to develop different methods and strategies for how to balance the workload of reviewing all of that. But because supervision is part of our fiduciary duties, lawyers, senior attorneys will have that responsibility. Now, Moravec's paradox, Moravec was actually a roboticist, and he pointed out something that was paradoxical, that for computer programs, for artificial intelligence, those things that to us seem easy, like walking, balancing, being able to recognize a face in the crowd, those things are more difficult for computers and AI. Whereas things that would seem difficult for us, like high-level reasoning, strategy, winning a game of chess, or passing the bar exam, are actually easier for AI systems. So that's the paradox, that things that would seem easy to us are difficult for computers, and that things that would seem difficult to us are easy for AI systems. Moravec's irony is something I coined, actually. Maybe I should call it Martin's irony. But it's the idea from my experience, and when I talk to lawyers about AI and products that use AI, it seems that on the one hand, attorneys worry about AI replacing them, yet on the other hand, they're disappointed when AI doesn't perform magic and can instantly replace the work that they do. So it's a little bit of a ironic finding on my part that lawyers are disappointed that they are not being easily replaced. The billable hours under pressure, as I mentioned, 43% of attorneys expect a decline in the use of the billable hour. Clients are demanding efficiency and cost certainty. They're not ignorant of the fact that artificial intelligence is making knowledge work easier and quicker, and they want to reap the benefits of that. Now, another force that's at work in putting pressure on the billable hour is that because there's shrinking opportunities for equity partnership, the lawyers that are extremely talented but not on an equity partner track, maybe they're non-equity partners or income attorneys that just get a salary, they have incentives now to jump ship and create some innovative solution that can compete with traditional law firms. So all of these things combined lead to a world where the billable hour will be probably something that won't be as common. It may take time. Habits die very slowly, and it is something that we're very accustomed to as lawyers, to bill for our time. So let's look at these evolving business models that might replace the billable hour, or at least substitute for it in some cases. The first is flat fees, and flat fees make a lot of sense when it's routine work or work where you can estimate quite easily what amount of time would be required and how complex the work would be. For example, drafting a will or an estate plan. And that based upon that experience, you know approximately how long it would take and what involvement there is with the client. And so you could price it accordingly. Subscriptions is a different way to go, where it's actually a monthly subscription like a software service application that you subscribe to on the web or on your phone. And so clients would have access to certain products that are available online at will, where they could simply help themselves to information or to answering a few questions and using document automation, creating an estate plan or some document service. It is also possible that the subscription model would allow them to have access to a lawyer for a limited amount of hours per month for advice. Value-based pricing is based upon the value you deliver as a lawyer. So it's not based upon your time, it's not based upon a flat fee, but actually based on the value of the outcome. So that, for example, a contingency fee is based on a certain amount of value that a personal injury lawyer delivers to the client. In a similar way, even for business matters, if you look at the value delivered for the client, an attorney can gauge the pricing for the service they provide based upon that. And in that sense, it's a bit of a win-win because the client gets more value and the attorney gets compensated for the work that they've done regardless of the amount of time that they put in. Another type of model is to combine tech with legal services. So to have a partnership between tech providers and legal service providers like lawyers. To work together to co-develop AI tools or to offer AI-driven solutions, maybe advice online, maybe the document automation where you can sell services that are productized 24/7, 365 on the web or on your phone. You can compete on speed and cost with those types of models, and it truly fosters innovation because there's so many gaps in the market that are opportunities for a tech legal service partnership. Jevons paradox. So I'm talking a lot about paradoxes, but this one's important too. And both paradoxes point to larger economic issues. This one in particular, Jevons paradox, is that although we think and are worried that AI will replace us, actually the opposite might be true, in that it might actually create more demand. And so more efficiency can lead to more demand. And this is one example that I want to show you. This is an actual graph that shows, on the one hand here, the number of ATMs that were installed between the 70s and 2010. This other line here is the amount of tellers employed. And so just to back up for a second, put this in perspective, when ATMs came about, people were worried that that automation was going to outright replace bank tellers, that human bank tellers would be out of jobs and that these machines would replace them entirely. Sound familiar? What actually happened is that although it did reduce, as you can see here, it did reduce in the short term the number of bank tellers that were employed. What actually happened is by making ATMs available for the simple matter of getting money out of the bank or depositing a check, it reduced the operational costs of running a bank because many of the daily tasks that were undertaken no longer had to be completed by a human bank teller. You can have an ATM do it. And so it was, in the short term, not as necessary to have as many bank tellers on staff. So ATMs at that point early on were acting as a substitution for bank tellers. So there were less bank tellers in the short term. But what happened is, as a consequence of the ATMs lowering the operational cost of running a bank branch, it became more efficient to open new bank branches because they didn't cost as much to run and operate. And so it was possible to open more branches. And as a consequence of opening more branches, more human bank tellers were needed. So the paradox is that you would think that there would be the substitution of the machine for the human labor. But actually over the longer term, what happens is that that is not a substitution, but it's actually an efficiency driver that drives more demand. So let's look at some real world examples and best practices of all of this in practice. So one is Smart Esquire. This actually was an article that was published by Artificial Lawyer just this month. And so Smart Esquire is a startup that was founded by Esther Chiang. She's a former partner of Paul Hastings and Kirkland Ellis. White shoe law firms, big ones. And so what's interesting about this is that she's a former partner. Remember that brain drain I was referring to where partners are incentivized to innovate? Well, this is one of those examples of an externally developed disruptive model. And so the innovation here is that what she put together is a startup that could put together $1 billion private equity fund formation for 75% less than a large law firm. So specifically, it's estimated by her that it would take 2,000 hours of legal work, costing over $2 million to set up a $1 billion private equity fund. And that Smart Esquire, using a combination of intelligence tools and lawyers in the loop, was able to reduce that time necessary by 80% to 400 hours and a 75% reduction in cost to roughly around $500,000. So an incredible value delivered to clients, and one that is going to be really hard to compete with unless the law firms follow suit and also make a similar offering. So the next example, Neuron, is actually where a large law firm does just that. It's an internally developed disruptive model where essentially the law firm is creating a competitive service to its own hourly billing. So David Wang, who at the time was the Chief Innovation Officer at Wilson Sonsini, was instrumental in launching Neuron. And so Neuron is an AI-powered contract drafting and review service where it pairs an AI reviewer with a lawyer in the loop. And by combining them together, it greatly reduces the amount of time required and greatly increases accuracy. As you can see here, it scored 92% in identifying legal issues and applying the playbook position to the contracts that it was reviewing and drafting. So a much greater advantage for the client and value than paying by the hour. But at the same time, it's a win-win for the client and the law firm because besides the revenue that can be generated by taking on more clients and more contract reviews, it also provides a stickiness factor so that because this service is made at a more affordable rate and it's less expensive for clients to utilize, clients are more likely to use it. And so that relationship between the law firm and the client becomes stickier in that there's really no need for them to go elsewhere. So with respect to all of this, it's extremely important to balance efficiency and quality while we move forward into this AI-first practice of law. And lawyers widely agree that by 72% that AI is a force for good. At the same time, 96% believe that full automation through AI is going too far for good reason. And so it's continually necessary to review and verify outputs. But I would point out that it is a bit of a concern because the more efficiency, the more speed that there is in creating legal documents to review or legal memos that need to be site checked, as that amount of work product scales up, it becomes harder and harder to have a human lawyer in the loop. And so it will likely require a combination of AI checking and human checking to actually get through that volume of work that's created. So strategies for success. Now in the reading, you'll see that actually Professor Richard Susskind, he suggests there's 15 new possibilities for employment for lawyers in the future, and even now. Legal engineer, data protection specialist, and others. So the strategies for success are to think about all those possibilities, that law firms need to train their staff on AI basics. They need to make sure that everyone keeps current on ethics, because right now it's in a bit of a state of flux, and we'll talk about ethics in the next module. To look at the fee structure and decide if one of the alternative fee structures makes sense for your law firm. Maybe you can create a win-win situation where you could provide value to your client and also further cement that relationship so that they have nowhere else to go because you're providing them with such easy, effective, and reliable legal representation. And finally, it's really important to be transparent with clients. Now, regardless of the ethical requirement in a specific jurisdiction, it's just good practice to be transparent with them about how you're doing the work. If you're using AI, why not let them know? They might be relieved that you'll have a second set of eyes to look at your work product and ensure that it's of the highest quality. Not to mention the potential cost savings that they would get from that. So just to recap, we looked at the impact of AI on the daily practice of law, shifting roles and responsibilities, and how that might affect your future employment and opportunities that open up for you as well. Evolving business models, and finally, real-world examples of this innovation taking place now, and some suggested best practices for how to deal with the change. So with that, I just want to thank you so much, and this has been a discussion of the impact of AI on the business and the practice of law. The next module will be on ethics, and I'll see you next time.